Hello, welcome back to the channel. I think I left my mic on when I turned this camera off. So now I am not sure if the battery is gonna survive or not. Anyway, so today I want to talk about reparenting yourself and how hard it is, but at the same time, it is definitely worth it. Like last year in 2024, I feel like this heavy culminations of like having an exam day that is gonna get marked whether you have successfully reparented yourself or not. And I feel like this whole year was about that. Well, not its entirety, but like a portion of that is basically I'm trying to make sure that I pass the test, so to speak. And I don't know if it was true or not, or whether it's just in my head. But prior to that, like few years prior to that, I feel that's the whole process was about that because I was sick and I'm chronically ill and I have, um, uh, and it was really at its peak around 2021. The just in the middle of pandemic, it just make it really bad and worse. And because I also got the vaccine, and that really made my body haywired so much. It didn't handle it well. I'm not saying there's something wrong with the vaccine, but my body just didn't react well. And I felt like before then, I was also already showing a lot of signs of um, illnesses, even back when in 2012, where I did not know that my body was out of whack. I was told a long time ago when I was born that I had a thyroid issues and my mother had a thyroid issues. But I think the family decided, like the extended family as well, because when you're Asian, you are never like one nuclear family, right? Like everyone is always in everyone else's business. Like the extended family, I think, decided that, oh, the baby has thyroid issues, so it maybe it's just the way they are. So no one bothered to kind of try to figure out how to heal it anymore once I was born, which was ridiculous in my head. But this was like 40 years ago, so maybe the perspective was very different back then. And maybe I had a surgery because I noticed I had like a scar there, like a surgical blade, like there was a surgical scar there. So maybe they took my thyroid out or something. I don't know. There was just a lot of non communication and a lot of sensitive reaction, overreaction when the subject is broached. So, and I think my mom died because of that too, of neglect basically. And I don't know why she didn't want to kind of fix it or she didn't want to touch anything of it, as I was going through a lot of issues with my health, especially after the starvation period. And I was trying to uh, doing refeeding of myself. I noticed like a lot of the issues that I had when I was a kid comes back in like fury, like in a like all the symptoms were there previously to that, like 2 decades previously, but it wasn't as strong. It was just like in the background, and I was always like working or trying to figure something out. So like it was always being pushed aside and not being the main focus. But so it became worse and worse, and then it kind of exploded, and it became like the it became the first thing that you have to deal with. It become priority. But I also noticed all the symptoms was extremely similar to the ones that I used to have when I was a kid. The bloating of my stomach to the point where I couldn't figure out what was going on, and like, but one thing that didn't happen when I was a kid was putting on weight, because I was really skinny despite my uh bloating stomach. But I think that's also like a combination with perimenopause, which I'm going through now as a 41 years old. But I think like the reparenting comes in when I'm basically trying to fix myself the way that my parent tried to fix me but failed when I was a kid. And like that's from the health point of view, but it's also attached to a myriad of things, right? Because it's not only health. It's also attached to, you know, emotions, attached to your mental perceptions, your perspective about the world. So it was very challenging because I realized, like, as I was going through it, all the emotions that was kind of cast aside and not being looked at, because I grew up thinking, my emotion is not important because it was overseen. It was cast aside when I was a kid. And I think when you're sick all the time, people get really tired of you. People get really bored. Like, it's especially if you are not improving, when there is no improvement in your life. You know, they, it's a project that doesn't have a progression. People just drop it, and that's just the way people are. I feel like that's the way normal people are. And even though we put on a pedestal this concept of unconditional love towards your kids, I feel like in practice, in real life, that's not as common as we would like it to think that it is. I feel like conditional love is much more common. It's probably 90% on how we live as human beings. The ideal is, of course, like having unconditional love, but the practice is quite different. Um, I think like I had to reparent myself by insisting that I was worthy of being healthy, and I had to insist on the fact that I have the right to get better, and I have the right to put all my attention in fixing me and not just letting myself be, and also having to put myself first and not believing doctors based on what they're learning maybe 30 years ago in medical school, and just trusting myself more in looking for the solutions and not giving up. And I think not giving up is probably the key here, is not giving up on trying to get myself better. I feel like I was looking myself like a child, and my brain is acting like the parents. So, that's the title, Reparenting Itself. And I'm trying to help this child get to a certain amount, a certain level of health, so that she can be functional somewhat. And I think the consequences of that also also lead to positive consequences, because ultimately I figured, like, the answer is just not like one capsule answer, like what the doctor probably was trying to give me, which is like, that's useful, but it's not an answer. Like, the answer, when I explored it, came in a lot of variety. It's supplements, it's somatic therapy, MDR, it's nutrients, it's also cleaning your gut, it's adding supplements, taking away supplements, vitamins. So if I'm doing what I'm doing right now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it would never worked, because my gut system back then was so bad that it would probably could not absorb whatever it is that I put in as food. Back then, it cannot absorb anything. Like, the whole system from the inside was failing. So it was just like building things brick by brick and being patient. And of course, like, there's so much frustration, like to the point where it felt like hell, because my body wasn't doing well. It was in pain all the time. Like, it was in pain when I'm looking at the light, for example. It was in pain every time, because I'm living just on the route to the airport. So there was a lot of planes basically flying past. There's a lot of train flying past now. Like, yeah, now, like, if when I'm overstimulated, like today, because I have like 4 matcha cups, like, because I'm overdosing on caffeine, yeah, it hurts. But when I am usually being good and not overstimulating myself with caffeine, like, I can ignore those stimulation. I can ignore, the plane passing by at a very low angle where it's really loud, and when the freight train is passing by and it's really loud, I can ignore it, and my body doesn't go into dysregulation. My body doesn't go into severe pain, like when it sound pierce my ears, and um, it just becomes just something in the background. And the only reason that it can come to that now is because I managed for the past 5 years, 4 years to regulate my system. And that did not come easy at all. It came with a lot of hard work and a lot of money as well. But I feel like I know that's kind of like a journey of getting better. And I'm not all the way there yet. I'm still chronically ill. But I'm saying like I know it's like that's a health journey, but that's basically how I reparent myself, because I realize like my early journey in life is really focused on how I always constantly sick and I wasn't eating much. And I think I was just trying to self medicate myself by not eating much because it was uncomfortable. And I also realize as I get older that I am intolerant to a lot of vegetable oil, for example. And when I was growing up, I was being fed a lot of vegetable oil, like fried food or noodles, which they taste great. And I think they didn't know back then, of course, that I was intolerant to a lot of this. And it actually creates like um, severe reaction. Like I would get like massive sore throats and I would get like ulcers everywhere. And I still do get that nowadays. And I figured that out. If I eat these, I will get ulcers. I will get all this inflammation in my body. So I really should avoid it. But as an adult, that's different, right? Like you have a different way of understanding things. But back then, I didn't. And I think being an undiagnosed neurodivergent also probably didn't help. I probably was a mute back then. I probably wasn't talking much, so they probably couldn't get any answer out of me. I think even though I wasn't communicating well, I think the harsh reality is, as a child, I understood that my presence wasn't really wanted, and my sickness was a burden. So I think I just decided not to. I just pretended that I'm not sick anymore. I just pretended that I don't have any needs, because I think seeing people become so disappointed when you don't get better, it's really scary. I think you need a lot of love from people to grow. And if you are so aware that you are not loved because you require so much and need so much, and they themselves, of course, probably are sick as well and they don't realize it. And they also grow up with the fact that, you don't bother the adults because the adults are busy and the adults are stressed out. So, and to kind of like get rid of that idea that you are a burden and have yourself reparent in the form of what you need, which is like listening to yourself. And I got really angry. I got really angry with God. I got really angry with my situation, and just being there and kind of just like, yeah, be angry, be angry. Yes, I will listen to you. Just be angry. I will listen to you. I'm not going anywhere. I will listen to you. It's okay. You can be angry and I won't go anywhere. You can be angry and I'm still going to help you. You can be angry and I will always be here for you. Like you can do all the things that you want to do. You don't have to kind of hold yourself back, and I'll be here for you. It's okay. It's okay. And also like showing it with your action as well. Like when I was feeling bad, like last year, I just make sure that I still treat myself, even though it's just little coffees here and there. Like making sure, like even though in my bank account it's like, oh, I don't have much money, but I'm just going to commit myself to treat myself good and well. I feel like, and even if now, even back then, I was starting not to like the taste of coffee anymore. I know, blasphemous, but I was, and I think this year I haven't touched coffee much. Yeah, because I've been into matcha and hojicha, so I'm into that particular journey now. Um, but reparenting yourself is such a task. It's a big task. It's just constantly being kind to yourself, especially, and also looking at yourself and being very deliberate in how you care for yourself. And like sometimes I have to stop myself when I started being talking bad about myself or trying to be humble and trying to lower myself so that other people feel comfortable. I have to stop myself doing that. And when the people trying to encroach into my boundaries that I have set up quite gently and firmly and kindly communicated, not to feel bad about that, but rather to support myself to enforce those boundaries. And I think reparenting yourself, it mostly is taking your side a lot more. And I think now, like, as 41 years old or 40 years old back then, I realized like one of the sign of loving parents is that unconditional love. And one of the way to do that is sometimes is bad, but you take your kid's side even though you know he or she is wrong. And then of course probably you have like a talk behind closed doors when you get home, like saying this is not okay, even though I was on your side in public, like we need to talk about this and how this can influence you moving forward. And I think I like that style, so I decided to do that too to myself. Like, I don't feel like I did anything wrong or whatever, but maybe from the outside perspective, I was doing something wrong, but I always kept being persisting. I kept persisted to take my side, even though, and it is something that even though it could be perceived as a wrong side, like from society, it was something that I didn't do when I was a kid. And I realized like I was always blamed for a lot of things and unfairly so. So I think that was healing a little bit to and accepting the consequences. Of course, there's always gonna be consequences. Because when you're a kid, you're just trying to survive and you're trying to get out from a bad situation as best as you know how. And reparenting yourself is a journey, of course. It will never stop. But last year it was quite intense. I think last year was the brunt of the emotional phase of it, while the years and decades and the years previously to that was more about taking care of my health physically, making sure that I'm, coming out alive. And it was hard, but I think the intensity of emotional repair is also very hard. And grieving of that child that was being mistreated was also very hard. I think I had a lot of nights where I basically pretended that I was holding onto my inner child or inner teenager, like with a pillow, like replacing it with a pillow, like acting as if the pillow was my inner child and just saying things like, it's okay. It already passed now. You're okay. You're safe now. You're safe. I will handle it from here. You don't have to be afraid as much. I will support you even no one supports you. I'll make sure that you're fed. And I think that was also a very important thing. Like when I was going through the whole process, like I'm still going through it, of course. Like it was a never ending kind of process. But when back then I was like making sure I was fed was always a thing for some reason. Like, I think I remember because my mom said that she didn't breastfeed me. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe when I was an infant, like a day or two old, I was like feeling like I was deprived with food. And then the whole ongoing chronic illness ever since I was born about, having bloated stomach and everything kind of maybe was dealing with food as well. So that was like my relationship with food. Will with my other relatives, like that are my generation, their relationship with food are much more different. Like some overeat, some have eating disorders. Mine was more like illness towards food, like physically, because I think emotionally I'm quite neutral. Like if I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm full, I stop. And it's really rare that I use food as an emotional crutch. So I don't have that much. And I also don't like, not a lot, not intensely. I don't really feel like I use food as a diet, meaning like I don't necessarily relate food with weight. So I don't have that relationship as well. But I think the fact that the starvation period was also existing in my history by now, like by last year, I realized like one of the form of love is to make sure that the body is fed constantly, meaning like every day at least once. And to make sure that is given is a sign that you like this particular body, you take care of it, you make sure it's alive, you make sure that it's not dysregulated, you make sure it's happy and peaceful and content the best way you possibly can. And one of the ways to make sure it's fit. And I think that's my commitment, which is really weird if you think about it. And of course, like feeding it well and not feeding something that makes it inflamed or make it sicker than it is. And at least I'm listening to my body when it has complaints and not just dismiss it as like the doctors did, and think that you're not onto something, and trust my instinct a lot more. Yeah, of course, a lot of the times there's a lot of the times where I actually overreacted or overthinking things. That's true. But again, I think my principle these days is just taking my own side. And even if that's true, even when I am overreacting or overthinking things, I would give myself the chance to indulge on it and to say it's okay if you want to think like this, you can. Just, you know, go for it. Obsess about it as much as you can and be as intense as you want. And because I know from life experiences now that it doesn't last forever. It just probably lasts a year or two and then kind of get over it. And then I move on to a different type of obsession mentally and emotionally, probably, even though the problem hasn't really gone away, but my obsession with it has. And that's probably more important because I feel like if I don't allow myself to be obsessed about things that I wanted to be obsessed with, I feel I'm not allowing myself to express all the energy that I have inside outwards. And that means I will create too much garbage inside. And I don't want that. And I think that's also another thing, right? Like reparenting myself also means that I need to express my emotions so authentically, even if it's just me in my own room and screaming at the ceiling and at God and being really foul about it. And I also like did something last year that I found to be new experience for me, which is being angry at God and being okay with it. I feel like I felt safe enough to be really angry at God and say really nasty things, and I have this little bit of assurance in the back of my heart and my mind. It's like God I'm not is not going to leave me behind, even when I feel like I'm so angry at God, even when I feel like God, I'm alone. And I feel like it's safe enough for me to say this to the universe or whatever God that or whatever universe. Like I don't particularly have like a religious belief or affinity at all. I'm just using it as a concept that so that my mind can grasp a hold of a being somewhere out there that is helping me or not helping me at all. I feel like it's really helpful. Like I feel like that's a good part of reparenting as well, is basically allowing my inner child to express whatever it needs to. And one of the best thing is also to cry a lot. I find that to be the most helpful, especially last year, is to cry as much as possible. And there are a lot of times where I actually make sure that I just wait for myself to cry before I move on to another thing, because I feel like until you cry, it's not finished. Whatever it is that you're trying to say or do, it's like it's not finished. I feel like the crying is the excrement of that experience. It's like the output. It's like yes, it's out of my system finally. And until that happens, it's hard to move on. And also a good way to just be giving space for new things to come, like crying. Yeah. Well, I learned that from a toddler. I learned that, if they upset, they cry, and that's okay. And I was just trying to implement that to myself. It's like, if I'm upset and I'm crying, that's okay. It's like, okay, just cry. When you finish crying, like, you can take yourself out, or you can give yourself a good meal or something, and then just watch drama or whatever. Like, oh, it's good, right? Yes, it's good. Thank you. And just be a good friend to yourself as well. And I think, yeah, this journey of reparenting myself is still ongoing. It's definitely something that is not necessarily brand new, but it still feel like fresh. It still feel like a foreign concept sometimes. It still feel like I have to work hard at it. I still have to train myself to be a good parent to myself. And I feel as years goes by, you can feel like maturity started to sprout in some way. You get to see from a metaphysical perspective. I get to see when other people operating from their inner child rather than from their age. And that's something that was surprising. Like sometimes you can see like when they're operating at 5-year old rather than rather than when they're operating at 80-year old. And sometimes you get glimpses of their mature self, and they are very together, and they take responsibility, and they guiding you like an elder should. And like then it was, I don't know, like half an hour later they're bickering about who needs to get this and who's gonna go up and get it. And you realize like that's a 5-year old talking. um anyway, like, yeah, that's my journey so far, or at least that's what I'm aware of. And it's a good feeling, I suppose. I think I'm also still working on it, because as I am getting deeper and deeper into this reparenting myself journey, I find myself being kinder to children. Well, before I was quite indifferent. Like, I like babies between 6 months and 18 months because they're so cute, but they're not really talkative. And but I do have difficulty relating with children, like, when they're already talking, like maybe 5-year old to like 13-year old, 12-year old, like, they're just a human, basically a little human, but they're human now. And I don't know what to do with them because they have their own mind, they have personality. So it's quite different, but they're not human yet, like fully human grown yet. So you need to I don't know how to operate when I am with around them. Do I operate as a 41-year-old? How does 41-year-old operate? Because I don't have a kid of my own and stuff. So that's still a journey. But so far, I feel like at least I'm making progress, and I'm not like, I am frustrated a lot of the times, but I'm not stuck in that frustration. I think that's a good thing to have. It's like it progresses, it's frustration, and there's resolution, and then, maybe a new thing to deal with, and then there's a resolution, and it keeps going that way, which I find to be healthy, at least for now. It might change. Anyway, so that's my ramble for today, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. I will see you later. My name is Valerie, and I'm a solopreneur here on the internet. If you want to check out my shops, you can check out the description box below and see my links, and just check out my work online. And I will see you guys later. Bye, everyone.